Have you ever lost a game of Overwatch because your team simply doesn't have enough healing? Or have you maybe lost a game because the enemy team's defenses are just too much to break through? This could all be down to the composition of the support line on your team. In this video, we will cover the definition of main and off support, explain why they're so important to understand, and speculate a little bit on where Lifeweaver may fit into the game. Before we explain these roles, it may be easier to outline who fits where to begin with. Classically, your main supports are Ana, Bap, Kiriko, and Moira. This makes your off supports classically Brig, Lucio, Mercy, and Zen. Generally, this makes any of the supports labeled main synergize relatively well with any of the supports labeled as off. But what even is a main and off support? A main support is a support hero who focuses primarily on their healing output. They of course also tend to have very useful abilities within their kit, but these are often only activated when a certain situation arises, and are not the permanent focus of the hero. Think about a hero like Baptiste. Both his immortality field and his regenerative burst are incredible abilities that provide his team with insane survivability, but they're not the front of mind focus when playing Bap. Instead, you're focusing on keeping your team alive, providing a relatively consistent damage output, and utilizing your 2 cooldowns when your teammates need saving. On the other hand, an off support is a support hero who focuses primarily on these abilities. An off support of course can and should provide healing to their team, but their gameplay is actually focused on where they can best utilize their abilities. I'd like to example both Zen and Mercy in this instance. Zen's primary function is to discord the enemy tank, and act almost as a third DPS hero. His healing is good to leave on harder to reach DPS heroes, such as Tracer or even Pharah, but his healing isn't a reason why you would pick Zen. This also applies to Mercy as well. Her healing is pretty good, but she has 2 main goals she wishes to prioritize over healing. Her primary function is to utilize her damage boost ability, and her secondary function is to survive using Guardian Angel in an optimal fashion. Again, both of these heroes can and should heal, but their gameplay more so focuses around how their abilities can help out the team. In short, to work out which category a hero fits into, is their primary focus to keep a macro view on sustaining their team, or to keep a more micro view on where they can provide utility to help their team win specific interactions. Having a good mix of main and off supports in your backline is more important than you may think. The obvious shortfall here would be having 2 off supports and no real way to sustain the team. This leads to very volatile fights. Sometimes you may be able to win with both Mercy and Zen on your team should you damage boost and discord onto a specific target and quickly send them back to the spawn room. However, you have very low survivability in this comp and will generally lose more drawn out fights as you struggle to maintain your team's overall health pool, especially when it comes to maintaining your tank. However, 2 main supports isn't great either. You generally will have very high survivability, but in many situations it's almost too much. If everyone is full health and you still have 2 supports focusing on healing, you're missing out on a lot of free damage and utility by running 2 main supports. This can lead the supports to not be as effective as possible, and end up relying on their tank or DPS to carry the fight. In all honesty, I think this is why a lot of people see support as the easiest role, and claim it's all about just clicking your teammates. All of the top support players in the world do a lot more than just healing, and it's important to have this mix of supports in your team to, well, support your team as efficiently as possible. Most compositions that utilize 1 main and 1 off support are pretty good. However, there are definitely some that synergize super well. My personal favourite is the classic Bap and Lucio combo. Bap and Lucio both prefer their team to play grouped up. Baptiste has insane AoE healing, and being in a close group allows Lucio to perma-speed the entire team to engage. With both of Bap's cooldowns being defensive to help the team survive, he can generally sustain the team by himself, allowing the Lucio to do, well, Lucio things.
Bye-bye, big guy.
A more rogue and personal shout of mine is Kiriko and Mercy. Both of these support heroes have high survivability, meaning they don't require too much help from their teammates to survive against enemies diving them. Kiriko also has huge sustain similar to Bap. Her healing output is very consistent and also pretty high, and her Suzu can come in clutch to save teammates. The team also doesn't have to stay too grouped up with Kiriko, as her healing has a ton of range and she has great movement on a relatively short cooldown. This allows the Mercy player to potentially flank with one of her DPS, focusing on applying their ever powerful damage boost onto their chosen teammate. Again, most of these support comps will work as long as you're not double stacking main or off supports, but those are just a couple of examples you can think about when choosing which support to play yourself. Now let's talk about Lifeweaver. As I'm writing this script, Lifeweaver has just been released into the game. This means that the community as a whole has relatively little experience in playing him, and I'm kinda taking an educated guess from what we've seen from him so far to determine his role in the game. In general, guessing whether a support will be main or off within the first few weeks of their release is really difficult. These playstyles can totally change over time as the community figures out what does and doesn't work from a hero. I can also see him getting a few general changes and balances early into his lifespan, so this could definitely change at any time. With that being said, my best bet is that he will act as an off support on release. His primary focus should be setting up his own plays and providing his team with damage more often than healing. However, this is only because his healing output at the moment is really bad. If you were to play Lifeweaver effectively as a main support by focusing on healing and saving your cooldowns for situational value, then your highest possible healing output would come to around 50 per second. For context, Mercy is the only other off support who needs to actively heal, meaning she cannot provide any damage or utility whilst healing, and her beam achieves over Lifeweaver's healing at 55 healing per second. Even Zenyatta's healing orb isn't too far off Lifeweaver, coming in at 30 healing per second, and Zen's orb is completely passive, allowing him to use Discord and fire shots at the same time as achieving this healing. I wouldn't mind putting a rogue shout out there that sees Lifeweaver becoming a main support if they buff his healing output and rework some of his kit in the future, although I do doubt that they'll actually do this. As it stands right now, I can see his Petal platform being his strongest form of utility, being used as a great way to generate free high ground angles and even escape long-lasting ultimates. Think Orissa's Terra Surge, Cassidy's High Noon, or May's Blizzard. But the actual playmaking ability of this in ranked when it comes to coordinating as a team will be very scarce. So I can definitely see him being kind of weak on the general ladder system, but wouldn't be surprised at all to see a ton of clips of cool playmaking moments from him. In my opinion, his life grip pull ability will feel very similar to a Baptiste's immortality field, being held onto for long periods of time waiting to save a teammate. For these reasons, his kit could really swing either way. At the moment, he doesn't possess the healing required to be a main support, so I'm happy to settle with him being an off support and seeing how the Overwatch team treat his kit in the future. If you are interested in learning more about Lifeweaver, I may be planning to make a more in-depth guide on here in the near future, so consider subscribing or checking out some other content if you're interested in that.